Hey, what's up, guys? It's Will here for UFC 293. Israel Adesanya defends his UFC middleweight championship against Sean Strickland from Sydney, New South Wales. I'm back after being away for a little bit. My reason for not being around the last couple of months, I don't want to say I've fell out of love with the sport. I just kind of feel it's a little bit too much. And I think some of the fighters that we have in these cards nowadays I think it's diluting the product a little bit. And some of these guys literally have kind of no reason of really being in the UFC, and there is some people in this card. I mean, it has been coming for a few years, but for me, there's just a little bit too many fight cards, and it's kind of hard to keep up, watch fights, and I feel like I'm not giving you the full product like I used to back in the day, where I used to sit for hours and then watch fights. I just can't do that with a young family anymore. But last week I was in Paris, and I ran into a couple of people who hopefully are watching this that came into kind of really liking MMA and listening to fellow predictors like myself, Dan Levy, and others throughout the days, and they really want me to try and make a comeback. And like I say, not really a comeback, just come back to making videos and just hearing my opinions and stuff. And we spent a bit of time talking about it last week. And like I say, so I was kind of finding it a little bit of a chore with some of these guys you're looking into. So I'm just going to go forward. I'm going to focus on the fights I want to focus on and kind of give you my initial thoughts and where I might go in other fights, but not really be looking into it as much as I once would. So hopefully you'll stick around for me. If not, then it's what it is. I'm just here to really talk about the sport that I've followed for so long and spoke about for so long. And I still watch a lot of these days, maybe just not as much as I once used to, with so many fights going on. But yeah, let's get into this card. I appreciate if you're sticking around. Like I say, I'm going to try and consistently get these out at some point through a week and kind of go from there. Kiefer Crosbie makes his UFC debut from Ireland as he takes on Kevin Jousset from France, fighting out of the City Kickboxing team there. Two guys, like I was saying before, what is a UFC kind of standard fighter, caliber fighter these days? I don't see these guys as predominantly being that, and a couple others in this card. But this is what UFC looks like in 2023, moving into 2024. Guys who I just didn't think would ever seen the UFC, like with Kiefer Crosbie, I don't think he's overly a good Bellator fighter. Yet he's on here fighting in a pay-per-view in the UFC. Is what it is. But I'm very, very familiar with Kiefer Crosbie. Comes out of a straight blast journey in Dublin, Ireland, and a guy who I've seen kind of come through the ranks through the Irish amateurs, the Irish regional promotions into Bellator, took his licks in there, not with Bellator anymore, went on to the regionals, fought Alex Oliveira, got a big win over a former UFC guy, and now he's kind of been thrown into the spot here at 33 years of age. For me, it's just I don't know. And Kevin Jousset, like I say, he comes out of that territory there in Australia, New Zealand, so it kind of makes sense to really throw him in there for looking for a guy. And he looks fairly solid. Kiefer Crosbie is the striker. I think the grappling is more on the side of Kevin Jousset. So Kiefer's going to be super aggressive coming forward early on. Look to really put those hands in you, throw the jab out there and follow up with some big combination shots. And Jousset, I think if he initially withstands the early onslaught from Kiefer Crosbie, I think he works his way into the fight and wins rounds through that. Like I say, I've not looked into this an awful lot. I didn't really want to look into it an awful lot because I think there's other fights on the card that deserve my time more than this type of fight. So the kind of way I'm going with this one here is Kiefer will come out early. I think him to win the fight really kind of has to be early. He could get in there and win a couple of rounds, but I see Jousset tying him up a little bit, getting a couple of throws. I can see Kiefer working his way back up and then him putting him back down again. So ultimately, this could be a close fight. I kind of lean on the Jousset side, the Kevin Jousset side, but don't want to have any of my money kind of anywhere near this fight. But Kevin Jousset will be my prediction for that one there. Shane Jung against Gabriel Miranda is next up here. And two guys who I don't kind of see long for being in the UFC, but this is the fight to determine who kind of sticks around, in my opinion, because Shane Jung has had a pretty egregious run the last couple of years. He's not won a fight in like 4.5. That was over Austin Arnett, who's pretty a low caliber fighter with losses to Ludovic Klein. Now, Ludovic came in there and he is known for his head kicks, and he caught him with that. And I think he's the only guy to actually stop him. And then following losses against Omar Morales, against Blake Bilder, who I just don't think they're great great losses to have in your record. Where Gabriel and Miranda, I watched him live last year in Paris, gave a good account of himself, but it was just outgunned against Benoit Saint Denis. Not predominantly a great striker, also, although that he did kind of take it to Benoit a little bit and tried to initiate in the fight, but he never had the firepower to really maintain that throughout the fight. Shane Young, I think, is the more technical, crisp striker, but I think his confidence must be at an all-time low. This is a massive fight for him to stick around the UFC and maybe even his career, because he would then be 13-8. I don't know how old, maybe early 30s. So it's still only 30 years old. But this is a massive win. It's a fight that they're trying to think maybe get him a win in his kind of home territory. But I kind of thought they were doing that a little bit against Blake Builder, which I think was a very winnable fight. Miranda will drop down for submissions. I think he's got like 14, 15 submissions on his record looking into it. But I think that Shane Young definitely has the capabilities to come out here and put on a kind of a striking, I don't want to say clinic, but I think he can be the fighter that's kind of landing more and putting more out there, where Miranda, I think, will look to try and snatch something up, look to get the fight to the ground and capitalise on a mistake that Shane Young, I think, could make. I think Shane Young's like -200. I don't think you should have your money anywhere near that. For me, it's kind of dog or pass if I was betting. But as a prediction, I'm going to give Shane Young one more opportunity to kind of win a fight in the UFC. I think this is a good opportunity for him. But like I say, another fight, I don't want my money anywhere near. But as a prediction, I'm going to edge Shane Young at home to win that fight there. Blood Diamond, Mike Mathetha against Charlie Radtke is up next. Chuck Buffalo, I think his name is, which I found quite funny. I didn't go back and watch Blood Diamond's fights because I kind of know what he's all about. He's a striker, doesn't have a hell of a lot of grappling, can be very stationary off his back. And it's just, like I say, he's not UFC caliber. Never really was. Came in here because he's a friend of his. 3-2 record. I'm not used to seeing that, being a long time kind of fan of the UFC. You would have fighters with maybe an occasional losing record or 500 records, but he's in here because Israel is his guy, and we are in the territory which he comes out of. And then, like I say, they've brought in this guy, Charlie Radtke, coming in here, 7-3 record, fighting out Wisconsin. I would have been super confident for seeing this guy come out here and just grapple, but it's something that he doesn't overly do, honestly. I think that's a little bit of a red flag, especially if he doesn't come out in this fight and look to get takedowns, because even though predominantly I don't think he's a master grappler, I think that he can easily get Mike Mathetha down and really put him on the ground, be stationary, land some good shots on him and make it difficult for Blood Diamond. But when I watch Charlie, I just don't think he's got a hell of a lot of that in him. And I think that even if he was to take him down, I think Blood Diamond early on could initially find his way back onto his feet. Once he's on the feet, I think that Mike has the advantage. He's more technical, more combination of shots. And like I say, winning, I think he could win minutes and parts of the fight with that striking. But it's hard to be super, super confident in that outcome. But when I watch this kind of fight, are they bringing this guy in from America to take the L to Blood Diamond? Because, like I say, he does come from a very, very popular camp down there, down under. It's hard to really pick either guy here. So for me, I'm going to go dog or pass. So I'm going to take, as a prediction, I'm going to go Blood Diamond here, which via knockout. I think that Charlie is a little bit of a slow starter. He might initially get caught. So I'm going to go Blood Diamond first round TKO there, but it could become a little bit squirrely as the fight goes on later in that round there, later in the fight if it goes there. I apologise for there's a lot of noise out the front of the house now. So yeah. Moving on, we have Nasrat Haqparast against Landon Quinones. I was actually really looking forward to seeing Nasrat Haqparast in Paris last week. He was due to fight Sam Patterson, and then Sam had some issues, so the fight initially got nixed, and then he got put into this card, which sucked a little bit, because I would have liked to have seen him matched up. There was people offering to jump in there, and he's got a guy recently who's coming off tough. I don't think it's the greatest looking 2023 you getting beaten inside a minute by Jason Knight. Now, I know Jason is a former UFC fighter, fought some tough guys, but I still think it's not a great look. I think initially I think that he could win some fights with us through getting some submissions. I think the dog is barking. I don't know what's going on here. Don't know what's going on. And like I say, he has got some power there with his ground and pound and can look to take the fight to the ground. I think that Nasrat's just a little bit too crisp, too technical for him. I think that he's going to kind of beat him up over a larger part of the fight. But does he get him out of there? I think he possibly could. He's coming off a win over John Makdessi, a kind of veteran of the sport, and especially coming back after those 2 L's to Bob Green and Dan Hooker, who are two hard fighters to kind of face. This should be a kind of easy rudimental win for Nasrat Haqparast, but he's minus 400, and I don't really want to have anything really on that fight at minus 400 there. So Jamie Mullarkey against John Makdessi, the aforementioned John Makdessi here. This is a little bit concerning that this guy, Jamie Mullarkey, is coming back after a pretty brutal knockout against Mohamed Naimov, where I thought initially he was doing okay, and then he got kind of hit with some kind of hammer to the face, and then it's taken out there and is jumping back in here relatively quick, where you've kind of got the elder statesman here in John Makdessi, 18-8 record, coming off a loss a year ago to Nasrat Haqparast, where he really got outgunned from the get-go in that fight there. Coming off a couple of surgeries, I believe he's also been at fight ready, which is only really going to help him moving forward if he stays there. But he is an elder statesman of the UFC. I don't see him being around a hell of a lot longer within the UFC, but he's predominantly a very, very technical, systematic kind of striker. Will take his time, pick his shots, will be fleet of foot around the cage there, where Jimmy Mullarkey's more in your face fighter, will look to make it a little bit more rugged, a little bit more nasty, a little bit more just not the greatest looking fight. Will look to get in your face and can mix it up a little bit more. So kind of how I see the fight going. I think initially this might start out a little bit close, but then I can maybe see Jamie maybe mix in a little bit and maybe land a little bit more, have a little bit more of a pace about him. But I kind of think that John Makdessi might be, I don't know, I've got a funny feeling that John might be a little bit live initially early on, but then as the fight goes on, I think that Mullarkey will take over. So for me, I'll lean on the side of Jamie Mullarkey to win that fight there. I'm going to take him to win via decision in that one. Up next, we have Jack Jenkins against Chepe Mariscal here in the featherweight division. A really sound, fun fight. Two guys who, this guy, Chepe Mariscal, has really played his dues out there. 14-6 record. I didn't give him, it's kind of bad look at my part now, I didn't give him much of a chance to. I thought he was going to get caught, honestly. I thought Trevor Peek was going to catch him. But he came out there, fought a really fun fight, was in the face of Trevor Peek, was landing heavy shots too, was getting takedowns. And I was so surprised that fight kind of went to decision there. But like I say, he's a guy predominantly comes from a good camp there, Elevation Fight Team out there in Colorado, where Justin Gaethje is one of his main training partners. And this guy here, Jack Jenkins, coming out of Australia, this was a guy when I was looking into initially before his UFC debut, and I thought, right, what is this guy's ceiling in the UFC? And I didn't see it too high, but I think he's a really, the more that I've looked into him a little bit more now, I think he's a very, very solid sound fighter who the kind of time is now for him being 30, coming on 31 next year. But there is things to like about him. There's a lot of people chirping about his last fight, Jamal Emmers, probably should have won that fight. And I think initially when I watched it, I kind of leaned on the side of Jamal Emmers, but it was a close fight where the rounds were close and they went in the side of Jack Jenkins. But there's a lot of things to like. I think he's a very technical striker. But I think that the one thing that really jumps out at you, and one of the things that I didn't really like about that one, I'll go into that one first, is that he got put in his back, which we kind of thought that Emmers could do that for large parts of the fight. Initially didn't really do as much as that, and he did look a little bit lackadaisical kind of off his back. Really kind of didn't really initially look to get back to his feet, but eventually he found a way to get there. And like I say, there is some things to like about him. I like his striking. I like everybody that makes video predictions will see how much his leg kicks can really disable fighters, and that was a thing before the UFC. And I think in the UFC, it can be, especially against this kind of caliber opposition, where he could literally come out here and throw leg kicks for days and really disable fighters. At minus 200, I got in at minus 200. I only have one bet for this week so far, and it's a parlay, and Jack Jenkins is a part of that parlay, minus 200. I think that Cheppy will be very dogged in there. We'll look to come forward. We'll look to make this a scrap. Maybe look to get takedowns. I just think that Jack, for me, is a little bit too technical right now, and I think this is a good look for the UFC. They kind of know what they're doing with this fight here, getting Jack another win. Is that going to be his third win? Third win after Don Shainis and Jamal Emmers. To me, this is a little bit of a step back from Jamal Emmers, even though Jamal sometimes doesn't really show his full capabilities. So for me, I think that there's a late knockout on the table here for Jack Jenkins, maybe a third round TKO. But for me, I am going to pick Jack Jenkins to win this fight here. Up next, we've got Carlos Ulberg against Darton Jung. Two kind of counter strikers that are kind of facing off against each other, and two guys that are kind of probably confidence-wise at vastly different places. You've got Jung here coming in off a couple of losses, where that loss to Devin Clark, not a good look in my opinion. I don't think he looked great in that fight. And you look at the other side here, Carlos Ulberg, riding high, wins over Pedro, Nico Namagamoreno, and Tafa and Chukwi. He's kind of really found his footing in the UFC, and Fabio Sharana should add in there. He's really kind of found his feet in the UFC. A pretty solid striker, pretty good fighter, but I just think he's fighting the kind of lowest caliber 205ers out there. Where is Darton Jung in that kind of conversation? I think for me, he's a little bit of above that. I wouldn't put him down there with your Peterias and Sharants and so on, but I don't think he's an awful lot higher of a skill set guy above those, skilled fighter above those, I should say. And Carlos is really, like I say, he's really found his form in the UFC, picking his shots well, not rushing anything like the Kennedy fight where he was throwing serious output there and then eventually got compromised, got hurt, got taken out. And I'm kind of struggling to see where Darton Jung really cements himself as a kind of a guy that should look like winning this fight, honestly. Him as a plus 200, plus 225, plus 250 dog kind of feels right for me. But then I don't really like the kind of the other side with Carlos Ulberg at like minus 300 plus. Don't like that whatsoever. So for me, it's a prediction. I'm going to take Carlos Ulberg to win a decision here. Could be a possibility of a finish, but for me, I think Carlos just does enough over pretty much every round. You could see him win 30-27. If not, maybe Dad brings the fight, gets a round 29-28. But for me, Carlos Ulberg, I don't know what the prop line is in that by decision, but that's kind of where I like it there. So Carlos Ulberg via decision is going to be my pick there. Moving on to the main card, in the 205-pound light heavyweight division, we've got Tyson Pedro against Anton Turkalj, the pleasure man. This is probably the fight, honestly. I've had like 10 people message me in the last couple of days, and this is the fight that everyone's talking about or has been talking about. Well, I shouldn't say the last couple of days, probably since last Friday. And a lot of people on the Turkalj side, I think that they were just looking at the plus money they were getting in this guy. And I can see why you would bet him at that. On that side, if you're on that side, you want the plus money side. Now the line's kind of flipping to where Tyson Pedro is going to become the underdog. It's pretty much a pick 'em right now, like minus 110 a piece that we've got in the UK. And I can see why they would like Turkalj, because there's a lot of things not to like about Tyson Pedro. I think he's a great front runner initially and very early on. I think he's super dangerous, but I think he can kind of fold a little bit as the fight goes into rounds 2, rounds 3. If he gets put in compromised positions, he could really kind of flake out a little bit in fights. But when I watch Anton Turkalj, I'm not super impressed with what I see. Now, coming into the UFC, he has had a couple of tough fights. Jailton Almeida, he was kind of lamb to the slaughter in that one there. And then against Vitor Petrino, who I think could end up being very, very good. He had some spots in there where got takedowns, got to the back a few times. Then the explosive nature of Petrino would get back to his feet and look to really throw big, heavy bombs, also get takedowns, which he got a plenty in that one. And like I say, Tyson Pedro's, the guys that he's beaten in the UFC are really low level. Wins over Harry Hunsucker, Elk Villanueva. I don't think those guys in the UFC. L's to Shogun back in the day. That was like 4 years ago. But that L there to Modestus, I don't think it's a great look. I'm going to go against everybody which seems on Twitter, X nowadays, whatever it is. Everyone seems to be on Turkalj and be kind of like super confident in that. That's not me at all. If this line kind of keeps going and he's an underdog, I can see myself maybe underdog odds, maybe having a poke at Tyson Pedro. But I really have to kind of sit back and kind of reevaluate myself if I'm planning on betting this guy, because he could fold at any second, at any point in the kind of mid part of this fight, and you're like wondering what you did there. So as a pick, I'm going to pick Tyson Pedro in this one here, but not super confident. And if I'm not betting it, good luck to all the guys that are on Anton Turkalj. But Tyson Pedro is going to be the pick for me in that one. Moving on to the heavyweight division, we've got Justin Tafa trying to get this fight back again against Austin Lane. These two guys tried to fight a couple of months ago. There was a pretty vicious eye poke where Justin Tafa couldn't see there. And like I say, in that fight there, I was picking Justin Tafa. There's no reason for me to really change my pick in the limited time that we had from that first fight. But what I did like from what we've seen from Austin Lane in that fight there was the fact that he wasn't kind of scared to come forward and kind of throw some shots. But obviously just the agreement with the finger to the eye really stopped the fight in its tracks. And hopefully Justin's all right, because like I say, that's one of the things I don't like seeing in the fights is fingers to the eyes. That can really, when I seen Bisbin last week and you see the state of that guy's eye, it's like that's when you can really see how much damage and how much it can really kind of change your life by stuff like that happening. Like I say, I don't think you ever want to be betting this number here at minus 240 to minus 275, which is now kind of dog or pass for me. But where we are, like I say, I think the last time they were fighting in maybe Austin Lane's backyard. This time they're down in Tafa land and down under. So he will have a vast support there for him, looking to get a big win at home. I think this is a good spot for him to kind of keep his winning streak going. I know he's got that draw in there, but wins over Parker Porter, which is not the worst look in the world, honestly, because Parker made some decent little gains in his game, but he got taken out last time by Justin's brother. And Harry Hunsucker, like mentioned before, not super high caliber, but if he wins this year, it's 3 out of his last 4 with a draw in there. I think this is an opportunity for him to really get another win at home, potentially get another bonus. So I'm going to take Justin Tafa to win via knockout in the first couple of rounds here. Like I say, Austin Lane, could I see him winning UFC fights? I don't know. I'm not on the kind of fence that he will win fights in the UFC, but there's some pretty low caliber heavyweights, and there has been over the last couple of years that might still be there that he could get a win over. But for me, my pick is going to be Justin Tafa via knockout in the first couple of rounds there, but I won't have any money on that myself. But Justin Tafa for the win there. Flyweight division, we've got Manel Kape I should say, against Felipe dos Santos. This was supposed to be Manel Kape against Haqparast, which I think would have been a decent fight. This was a little bit of animosity at the press conference with him lobbing a bottle at Haqparast and Izzy standing up to him and Manel just not backing down from Izzy, which was quite cool to see. But you kind of got a newcomer here in Felipe dos Santos jumping in here very, very short notice. Was supposed to be in Dana White's Contender Series, which was the right spot for him. But when I watched some fights from him, I liked a lot of what I've seen. Undefeated 7-0 guy coming out of the shooter box. Like I say, decent wins. Nothing really stands out. I think he's a very, very, obviously, if you come from the shooter box kind of background, super aggressive, will look to put it on you. And just it's 100 miles an hour, but initially could kind of fade out as the fight goes on, especially at this level. But when I'm talking about this level, he's not even fighting the lower caliber flyweights. He's coming in here, in my opinion, against a top 5 flyweight who potentially in 2024 could be fighting for a belt. When this guy made his debut in the UFC, they were putting him against the guy who's got the belt right now. So you can see where they kind of put these guys in. Like Manel Kape has had so many fights fall out. I couldn't even look at his record and tell you how many he's fell out. I know Matt Schnell's been a couple of times. Obviously, the Haqparast one. I think it was Davis and Figueiredo. So this guy, overall, very, very confident striker. Kind of likes his own work a little bit too much. We'll sit back and admire that a little bit, which consequently could lose him fights at certain points. But super, super dangerous guy at all times. Big power. Will literally put it on combinations up top, go to the body, and initially we'll find a way to kind of break you down a little bit. And he's on his pump a little bit. Like, that was a beautiful flying knee, knocked out Jalgas, got a great win against David Dvorak where he nearly got a choke in that one there. I think he's starting to put it all together, and I think this is a fight that he should win fairly convincingly. He should be putting himself in the bracket here for a bonus, in my opinion. I think that the come forward style of Santos is going to really help Manel Kape in this one. I think he's going to unload to the body, and I think he's going to break this guy down and break down Felipe Santos. So for me, I'm going to pick Manel Kape. I was talking about that parlay earlier. I've got Manel Kape and Jack Jenkins together. I think it's -108 I got it at. So a little bit of chop, but not too bad. But Manel Kape is going to be my pick for that one there. Co-main event of the evening. In the heavyweight division, we have Thai Bam Bam Tuivasa against Alexander Drago Volkov. I will come out and say something here. Like, I absolutely love Tai Tuivasa. If you meet Tai Tuivasa, there is no way you cannot like this guy. He's just the salt of the earth, nicest guy there is, will fight anybody, will try and give you the most exciting fight possible, and it's hard not to be a fan and not to root for this guy. And that's kind of where I am in this fight here, because I did that with the Pavlovich fight, and when I look back at that was just and I bet him at underdog odds there. I think at underdog odds, I'd bet Tai a lot of times, honestly. But I am a fan of this guy. Like, I am absolutely a fan of him, of his family, just his background. He's just a really nice, down-to-earth guy that it's hard not to root for in any capacity. And like I say, he's fighting at home here. You're getting plus 200 odds against the guy who could potentially come out here and really break him down. When you watch that Ciryl Gane fight, now I looked at it from being in the crowd and also watching it at home. In the crowd, you see that he's making this fight closer than a lot of people initially thought. But and then he drops Ciryl Gane and all that. But when you sit back and you watch it at home, you realize that he's kind of getting picked apart a lot by Ciryl Gane, which Ciryl can do. But he got in there and made that fight closer than it probably really should have been, and had opportunities in that fight and gave us a great fight. But ultimately, he was taken out there. Ultimately, was taken out by Sergey Pavlovich. Now, I don't think he really has to worry about the deafening big power of Pavlovich or the striking diversity of what Ciryl Gane is. But you have got someone who's very big, long. If you watch the press conference today, you can see Tai Tuivasa was looking like, you're big. So he could fight at distance here, look to kind of keep the body, look to attack the body of Tai Tuivasa, which I do think is a good ploy for potentially getting him out of there. But I think Tai's going to have opportunities to come forward here and land on Volkov. And if you can land the right shot on Volkov, you can absolutely put Alexander Volkov out. We've seen that a couple of times in the UFC. Although, like I say, his losses are to Tom Aspinall, top 5, top 3 guy. Ciryl Gane had the belt, top 3 guy. And everything else he kind of really handles pretty well. But for me, this is probably a heart pick. I want Tai Tuivasa to win, especially at home. He's going to have a lot of family there. I think he's went back and he's doing his camps in Australia instead of Dubai in the Middle East. So I am rooting for the guy. I'm going to pick the guy here. Like, my prediction is that I think that he gets some of those leg kicks off and really stops the kind of kicking game of Alexander Volkov and gets on the inside and lands a shot which kind of takes out Alexander Volkov at some point in this fight. Want to see him get on top of that octagon, grab a random shoe and just sink a beer. So like I say, my prediction is that I think he knocks out Alexander Volkov, and I think that he does it via knockout. And I really want to bet Tai Tuivasa, but again, that is a heart over head thing for me, where I want to see this guy succeed. I'm getting underdog odds, but as a better, you kind of got to pick your spot. So maybe have to rein back off this. But I'm going to pick, as a prediction, I'm going to take Tai Tuivasa to win via knockout there. Main event time here. We've got Israel, the last style bender, Adesanya against Sean Strickland for the UFC middleweight championship of the world. And we've got a pretty big kind of betting line here on the UFC champion, Israel Adesanya, who responded to that loss to Alex Pereira by landing the knockout of the year. I don't care what anybody says, that is the biggest and best knockout I think we've had in 2023 in the UFC. and the celebration afterwards was legendary on top of it. I think we were all prepared to have seen Izzy against Dricus du Plessis. Dricus, I think honestly, he's doing the right thing by not jumping in here straight away after the Whittaker fight. I'm sure he puts in a lot of work for those camps, and the gains that he's had in the last 2 years in the UFC, I didn't see him getting anywhere near a title shot. I thought if top 10 would be possible, and he's out here knocking out Robert Whittaker with that big hook that he landed there. Looking into this fight here, this to me, I think Izzy should rip through Sean Strickland. When I look at Sean Strickland, that stand-up, very straight stance that he has there, to me just screams like Izzy's going to pick whatever shot he wants and land on him here. I've seen people come out and say Sean Strickland might use a wrestling game plan. It's like, when do you ever really see that being a possibility? Because Sean Strickland's never really been known as a grappler. He can show it in his initial UFC tenure. You always loved the jab that he had and loved his initial striking, but could mix in a couple of takedowns here and there and make it interesting. When he was at 170, 185, he's coming off a couple of wins here over Nasruddin Imavov, good wins. Abus Magomedov, I don't think that's a great win, honestly. I don't think Abus is all that great, but he was the love of everyone that week. Abus Magomedov, I was on the Sean Strickland side here, and he came out there, took him outside a couple of rounds once Abus started to gas. How do I see him winning this fight? Again, I think he has to land a shot that's going to stop Izzy in his boots and really give him the respect that he deserves with his striking. I just don't see that happening. I think this could be another one of these fights where Izzy really picks his shot, like a Yoel Romero type fight. He is known for a couple of boring fights out there where he will pick his shots. Sean will kind of plod forward with that kind of weird stance. I can see him getting ripped apart with leg kicks attached to the body, and then just the combination striking of Izzy. But like I say, is Izzy maybe downplaying someone like a Sean Strickland? I don't think he is. I don't think he's that type of fighter to downplay anybody, but he's out here talking about knockouts. I think knockout is the way to go. But could also see that maybe Izzy kind of just rides out winning every round, punishes this guy like 50-44, 50-43. Wouldn't surprise me if he gets knockdowns in this fight. Maybe doesn't get him out of there, but I think he's got enough with his overall game to get him out of there. So for me, Israel Adesanya is going to be my pick there, and he retains his UFC middleweight championship. And hopefully we see the du Plessis fight, but Khamzat and Costa are fighting soon. They could be one of the guys that steps in here, especially if Khamzat wins. Who knows? But Izzy for the win here to finish off UFC 273. So guys, that's my predictions here for UFC 293. Appreciate you if you watch this video. Appreciate you if you leave a comment. And like I say, I'm going to try and get these out, try and refine my love for really doing this week in, week out, like I have done for like 11 years now. But yeah, until next week, we're back. I think it's Shevchenko against Grasso next week. Until then, guys, appreciate you for watching. Catch me over on X, Twitter, at Will Martin MMA, and hope to speak to you all very, very